If you are hoarding mentally or indeed emotionally, if you're binging, what runs that is not enoughness. And all you have to do is say, I'm enough. I don't need, it even stops you overeating. I'm enough. I don't need more. As long as you feel not enough, you'll always need more.
And emotionally, I want to be in the present moment as much as possible. That's where we live. That's where we create the future from. And that's where happiness and joy exist. Most people are living in the past, regretting things and being angry about things, or living in the future, constantly planning or being afraid of what's going to happen.
It doesn't matter if they don't like you. It matters that you like you. But I'd love you to talk to our audience about how to decide what you want and then ask for it. So I loved that exercise, but please share it with me, because with our audience, because it was so profound.
Well, I'll share a couple of things with you. Number one is that you can certainly ask some basic questions, like if a genie came down and said you could have anything in the universe, what would you want? Because then people often will go beyond their rational mind and think about what they truly would desire to have. If I were to give you $1 million and you could do anything you wanted in life, what would you do? It's another question that usually brings up stuff like that. But I'll share something very interesting. I spent the month of February in India. There was a man named Dr. Pankaj Naram, an Ayurvedic doctor, who invited me over there. He said, if you give me 1 month of my clinic, I'll give you 17 extra years of life. I said, that's the best offer I've ever heard. That's a good financial investment. So he taught me something very interesting. If you take your left hand and you pinch the right hand, you put pressure right at the end of your fingertip like this, and then you push like this, press. So here's my finger, I'm gonna put my thumb right there, and then I'm gonna pinch really hard.
Okay.
And then you hold that, and then you ask yourself with your eyes closed, what do I really want? And if you do that for a minute, everyone always gets an answer. What do I really want? So go ahead, and everyone watching this, go ahead and do that for a few seconds and just notice what comes up for you. What do you really want? What do you truly want?
Okay.
Did you get an answer?
Oh, definitely.
What was your answer?
Well, I wanted two things. One is I've had two rather intense illnesses, so I want to live a really long, healthy life. And the other is I want my daughter to be really happy and fulfilled. So I think when you're a parent, you always have to have a wish for your offspring. So I have two, but they're very clear.
Yeah, very cool. Whenever I do this, the first thing that comes up is I want to be happy. And if I stay with it longer, then usually I come up with something like, as I mentioned, I've been involved with this essential oil company, and I had this goal to reach a certain rank in this network marketing company, which I actually reached about an hour ago, which was a big jump. So I'm really thrilled with that. But those were the two things that would come up for me. And so this doctor, he's a guru as well as a doctor. He's a certified MD, and he's also an Ayurvedic doctor trained in ancient tradition. But he said the secret to success in life is knowing what you want, knowing how to get it, and knowing how to enjoy it once you get it. So knowing what you want, knowing how to get it, knowing how to enjoy it. We all know people who don't give themselves permission to know what they want, because then they'd have to go do it. We know people who know what they want, but they don't have the knowledge of how to get it. And then we know people who are very successful in the eyes of the world, but they're not happy because they don't know how to enjoy their time, their wealth, their family, their freedom, whatever it might be. So the other thing he taught me that was really interesting, going way over what I normally share with people here, but this is fun, so we'll do it. If you take your arm and you put your hand, like it's hard to show you this. So I take my hand like this, and so I got my top finger right up against the bottom of the palm of my hand, like that. And then I roll it over like this. Right underneath that third finger, if I press right here, and I visualize what I want, and I also, this is what they call a marma point in Indian Ayurvedic. It's like an acupuncture point, but it's different. And so we're pressing there, and then what you do is you would close your eyes and you would imagine in front of your right eye and just a little bit above it, a white picture frame. And so when we visualize, according to this tradition, and I've been doing it now for the last 3 months, and it's really made a huge difference in the amount of abundance that's flowing into my life. What you do is you imagine the thing you wanted. You talked about living a long, healthy life, and also your daughter, the goal you had related to your daughter. and you would visualize what you would see in the outer world if both of those things had already manifested. How would you know that that was happening? So what would you visualize? Now, I know you say you're not a big visualizer, but you can think the vision even if you don't see it. But if you
Yeah.
see it, even better. And you just press that point a few times as you visualize that. And what that does, it actually stimulates a part of the brain that comes up with the solutions that will help you achieve that. And so I do that every day. And literally, I have had about 5 opportunities come into my life to fulfill my vision. People that I never would have expected reaching out to me, opportunities being placed in front of me for millions of dollars of revenue that I wouldn't have predicted would have come to me, and with ease. And so basically, I've just given you 2 secrets that most people will never learn because they never go to India and
Yeah,
hang
I
out
love
with.
it. Yeah, I've been there many times. And I was interested in what you said about asking for what you want, because I find with many of my clients, there's something else. They have this belief, I'm not worth it. I can't
Yes,
ask for help because I can't ask for love. I might get rejected. Even when I work with people, I used to work with women in IVF clinics, and they'd always go, yeah, but I don't want to tell anyone I'm pregnant in case I have a miscarriage. I'm not going to buy anything for the baby in case I lose it. I'm like, look, you're planning to lose the baby, and
exactly.
people get very upset about that. But you have to believe you're worth it. Everything you're saying is so good. But I always say to my clients too, what do you want? How do you get it? Why do you want it? But you also have to go back, because I see the number one problem in relationships is, well, he's too good for me, she's too good for me, or they're not really good enough for me, but I'll never find anyone else. I'm just going to stick it out. And I see so many problems in relationships because of the fear. I don't deserve what I want. If I find someone amazing, they'll leave me because they're better than me.
Yeah, they'll find out I'm not good enough at some point,
Yeah,
and then they'll leave me. I don't want to have that rejection. I think,
no,
self-worth, again, the word self-esteem, you probably know this, comes from the Latin word aestimare, and aestimare means to estimate, and the word esteem is your estimate of your worth. And
yeah,
so basically, we have a mental construct and a belief about how worthy we are, and normally that's formed somewhere between the ages of 3 and 8 years old. By the time most kids reach 2nd, 3rd grade, they've decided if they're smart, if they're attractive, if they're athletic, if they're likable, if they're lovable. All of those things usually occur during that period of time. So my experience, Marissa, is I have to go back with my clients and do a process that I've developed with another woman. We're actually writing a book about it now called Unstuck, where we will ask them, what's something in your life you can't seem to manifest? And well, in this case, it might be a loving relationship. And then we'll say, okay, what is it that you feel? Close your eyes, and what do you feel when you think about the fact that you can't manifest this? And then they say, well, I feel, frustrated, unworthy, resigned, hopeless, whatever it might be. Then I'll ask them to scan their body from head to toe and notice where in their body do they feel the greatest amount of tension, pain, or numbness, because numbness is numbing out the pain or the tension, and because they've held it tight so long. And then what's the feeling inside of that? There's a feeling inside of that sensation. And then I say, go back to the earliest time you can remember feeling that same sensation, that same feeling. And everyone, I've done this with 1,000 people on a Zoom call. I've done this with, I did this with 8,000 Herbalife distributors in India with a translator in Tamil. We did this exercise, and everybody, I would say 99.5% of people all go back somewhere between the age of 3 and 8. And I'll say, where are you? And they'll be anywhere from like in their kitchen, in the playground, with their brother, with their grandmother, in a closet somewhere, whatever. And what was happening? And it was something happening they didn't want, like they're being punished, shamed, made fun of, hurt, abused, whatever. Or there was something they're wanting they weren't getting, like attention or affirmation or love or being held or being protected or whatever. And then I'll say, what decision did you make about yourself or about life that's still limiting you today in that moment in time? And everybody comes up with a decision they made. And that decision is still running them in their life today. Like, I'm not worthy of love. I'm not attractive. It's not okay to make noise. It's not okay to ask for what I want. It's not okay to be sexy. It's not okay to have needs, not okay to cry, whatever. And for me, when I do that exercise, I went back to, for me, it was not okay to cry as a boy. I had a military father during World War II. If I cried, it stimulated his uncried tears. He didn't want to feel that, so he would shut me down. When I was a baby, I found out later from my mother, he would put me in a car and tell my mother to put me in the car and come back in because he wanted to be nurtured and he didn't want to hear me. So I would cry endlessly. No one would respond. So at the age of pre-verbal, I decided there's no point in crying. There's no point in asking for what I want. No one responds. So it wasn't until in my 20s when I got into psychotherapy that I even learned it was okay to ask for anything, that it was not a sign of weakness, you know, that it was okay to cry. And, you know, so all I'm saying is that there are techniques and technology now where we can go back, identify that belief, release it, replace it with a new belief and come back. And then that self-worth can go up because it is ultimately a estimate of yourself that's mental. Now we can do some things. And I think the unfortunate part is most people think I will be more worthy if I lose weight. I will be more worthy if I make money. I will be more worthy if I show up on the cover of, you know, Elle magazine. But it never works because there's always that underlying belief inside that you're trying to fix externally instead of internally.
Yeah, I believe that so much, that we make a decision and we make, you know, children before the age of 5 have only feeling, no logic. So when the parent isn't there and they're at work, they make a decision, oh, they're at work because work's better than me. Mum is back out, mum is unhappy, I'm not enough. And, you know, I have this whole I'm not enough movement. And it's always amazing how early people go back to that. One of my clients told me that in rural Ireland, she was the fourth daughter and her mother was pushing her out in the buggy and the man came and said, I feel so bad for your husband. You know, he's not a man without a son. You didn't give him a son. And she immediately had this feeling of, oh, I failed. I should have been a boy. And interestingly enough, she became a fire chief. And her husband was always very stressed because she would not let him even, I can put up a shelf, I can paint the wall. I don't wear dresses. And it's all stemmed back to this decision she made as a little baby. I've let my father down. I've disappointed both my parents by not being a boy. I can't fix it. It's what I call learned helplessness. I can't possibly fix that. I can't change gender, but I can start to act like a boy and be like a boy and be the boy that my father needed to have. And the day she got that, it was a game changer for her. But, you know, we need somebody to show us we make these decisions so early. Oh, we didn't have any nice food when I was a kid, so now I binge. We didn't have money when I was a kid, so I still live in a poverty mentality. But then you have to go back and go, but that's not me. That was me at 5. I'm now 45. One of my clients said, you know, I was a premature baby. I was fed with a dropper. My mum would cry hysterically when I brought up the milk because I was going to go back in the incubator. I'm like, yes, but you're 45 years old. You weigh 400 pounds. You're never going to die again from being underweight. You've made people tell their story and they tell it with such conviction that they're still in it. Mm-hmm. So something else I loved you talking about is the one thing that we can do to succeed in changing our story. Now, I would say we tell the movie of our life, but our job is to change it. Stop playing the same movie and changing the ending. You need to change the beginning. Oh, I go out with guys that diminish me just like my dad. Well, don't find a diminishing man and try and turn him into a complimentary man. Find a complimentary man from the beginning. If your dad was a withholder, don't date withholders, date people who are giving. Stop changing the ending, change the beginning. But I loved your one thing that can give you an amazing future. Would you share that with our audience now?
I'm sitting here going, God, I wonder what she's referring to.
One of the things in your book was the one thing that would give you an amazing future, the one thing that would, and of course it's different for everyone, but you were talking about the one thing that would give you an amazing future, that would help you have success in your life.
Well, I think, you know, what comes to mind as you mentioned that, and I'm not sure exactly what I was saying when I said that you read it or I put it in a document or something, but the idea being that I think you have to decide what it is you want. You have to then ask yourself, who's already got it? What does it look like when you have it? And then you have to do the work. And I think, you know, part of it for me is visualization. I find that if I start visualizing what I want, and start visualizing having it. In this case, the man who's gentle, loving, kind, the person who's going to treat you well, etc. It may bring up discomfort, and it's okay. Allow yourself to be in that discomfort, to go inside, to feel the discomfort, to see what thoughts are behind that, to go back, excuse me, to go back in time. Like you said, I love what you said. I never heard it said before. Don't change the ending, change the beginning. I really do think that's the core of the work that has to be done. And I think that what happens when you really get that what happened to you at some level, if you can really heal it, is a gift. I mean, obviously the woman that became a fire chief and won't let her husband support her and is very masculine, not allowing herself to own the feminine side of herself because she's only half there. But she developed a level of strength that most people don't have. So there's a gift in that. So if she can appreciate that, but realize that there's still more to gain, that they doesn't have to be stuck in that. Often we end up resenting people, and that resentment keeps us stuck because whatever you resent and push against, you end up being formed by. There's often have people put up a hand, and I'll start pushing on their hand, and immediately their hand will go like that. And so we're pushing. And so what you're pushing against, you become. You take the form of it. And so basically, I think it's important that you do what you were saying, and we both teach this about going back to finding out where is that limiting belief coming from, and heal that belief, and then really let go of the resentment, forgive the person for what they did, because that person was a victim of their culture, just like Sheba ended up being a victim of their culture, and then look at what can I appreciate, what's the gift, and now I can take that and then build the future I want to build. So. And there are a lot of one things. I think surrounding yourself with people that can support and nurture you. I mean, you and I are coaches, we're therapists, we're trainers. My wife used to have this phrase that therapy was too good to be wasted on the mentally ill. You know, the idea is that the walking neurotics, which most of us are, grew up at least that way, need people that have been down the road that can guide us and support us and help us to be more successful and teach us the skills that we didn't learn in school. I mean, none of this stuff we're talking about was taught in school. 10% of Americans graduate from high school never having set a goal. They've not developed any kind of what I call emotional intelligence. They don't know how to manage their own emotional states. They don't know how to get themselves out of anger or create peace and calm in their lives, etc. So I think that another big one thing I would say is to make sure you surround yourself with people, whether it's people you pay or people you just, you join a group of people in a support group or, that kind of. My wife belongs to 3 women's groups, and they're all very different. One is all authors and coaches and people like that. Another one has a bunch of different careers, but they're all supporting each other on their emotional journey. And there's another group that all supports each other on their group as parents. Now, our kids are all in their 20s and 40s, but there's still parenting and grandparenting going on. But I think giving yourself the support, thinking you have to do it alone, is a real stretch. A lot of people have that belief that, I have to prove that I can do it by myself. And that's another belief that gets you in trouble.
Yeah, doing it by yourself. And I'm never going to ask for help. It's like, well, if you never ask for help, what will you get? They go, nothing. I'm like, yeah, exactly. You got to ask for what you want with a belief that you're worth it. And you have to, one of the things I found so fascinating about the mind was that we are hardwired to run back to what is familiar while running away from what is unfamiliar. And again, I see this with people who say, well, I found this guy, but he was too good for me, or I got this job, but I knew it wouldn't last. I knew they'd find out I was a bit of a fraud. I lost weight, but I knew I'd gain it all back again. And what they're actually saying is, I returned to what was familiar simply because it was familiar. And I ran away from what was unfamiliar. And I go, look, it is a fact that you are wired to go back to what is familiar. But here's another fact. You can make anything you like familiar. I mean, I didn't turn left on a plane until I was nearly 40. But once I did, I thought, I'm never turning right again. When I was growing up, we didn't have central heating. We didn't have an ensuite bathroom. But, working out, eating healthy, taking the sugar out of your coffee, it really is as simple as making it familiar and saying, okay, I'm going to make dating a great person who respects me familiar, while making dating someone who diminishes me unfamiliar. And just that way of coding to yourself, oh, this is a kind of ancestral behavior, but I can stop it. Because people go, well, it's just who I am and I can't help it. But I wanted to, in the time we have left, I looked at your 64 principles and I picked 3 that I really thought were fascinating and would help the audience the most. And of course, the number 1, because you're such a man after my own heart, was clean up your messes and your incomplete. So in our last 10 minutes, could you tell our audience why it is so important to clean up your messes and your incompletes? Why do we need to do that?
Well, there's two levels of that. One is there's incompletes in your environment, all the clutter you have, all the things that are broken and not fixed, all the things that are in the garage and your attic and your basement and your trunk of your car that are just taking up space. All the things that are like a crack in the wall that needs fixed, the pictures that never stay straight, the pictures that are not in an album, the clothes that you haven't worn in 20 years and probably never will, that are stuffed in your closets. So all of that stuff takes up psychic energy. Every time you walk past that crack, you either have to notice it and pay attention to it, or what's even worse, we stop noticing it. So our awareness begins to numb out. And we stop noticing the things that are inconvenient, that are uncomfortable. And then we end up in this kind of numbed out state. And the other thing is that if you want to move forward in life, you have to have a clean slate, a clean playing field to play on. I go into most people's offices and look at their desks and look at their floor, and it looks like, a cyclone hit it. And a lot of people live in places like that. Some of these TV shows you see about hoarders where you can't even walk down the hall. I mean, you can't live an expanded life in an environment like that. So one is like cleaning up the physical space, but there's also the emotional incompletes, the undelivered resentments and demands and requests, the undelivered gratitude and thank yous that you have in your life. I mean, right now, when you go into a supermarket, there aren't that many people in there because of social distancing. But we've all had that experience of seeing someone in the supermarket that we have some unfinished business with, and we start avoiding the aisles that we think they might be going down so we don't have to confront them and see them. And, we go over to the vegetable side, hoping they'll go over to the bread side, and we won't see them before checkout. Then you're living in fear, you're living in avoidance. So for me, I believe that everything you clean up gives you more energy. It gives you a sense of fulfillment and completion. It builds your self-esteem that you can get things done. I often say to people, if you have beliefs like, I can't even keep my living room clean, what makes you think you could build a successful business? It's like it goes together. And so I really think that it's important to clean that up. And emotionally, I want to be in the present moment as much as possible. That's where we live. That's where we create the future from. And that's where happiness and joy exist. Most people are living in the past, regretting things and being angry about things, or living in the future, constantly planning or being afraid of what's going to happen. And so the more things I can complete, the more energy I have. There's actually a study done that a waitress, as long as she hasn't collected the bill yet, can remember everything everyone's had at all of her tables. But as soon as they pay the bill, she instantly forgets and can't remember. And so what happens is you want all those memory units to be available, those attention units to be available to focus on your current tasks and your goals, not all of a sudden all the incompletes you have running around you.
I must admit, I see so many clients hoarding, cluttering, binging, and I found that what lies underneath that is I'm not enough. So people will say, I bought those candles to feel good. I'm like, well, that's good. But if you've got 20, why do you need 24? I bought those dishes. I'm collecting this. I've got all these cushions. I'm buying more stuff because I'm not enough. And the more I have, the better I feel. But then, of course, if that worked, why would you need more? And so with cluttering, I find when you keep saying, I am enough. If I'm enough, I don't need all this stuff. My husband got very into Maria Kondo's book, and he said, oh God, I read this great book about getting rid of stuff. And I went, oh, I'll read it. Went, no, throw it away. I didn't want to hoard it. So when I finished it, I put it, in where we live, we put stuff on the wall. And when I was moving house, we just put so much stuff, and people come and take it. And it's such a good feeling because things don't make you feel good. Your interaction with people makes you feel good. And I found during this pandemic, giving stuff away, going, hey, I've got all this stuff, I don't really need it. Someone else needs it. And we were doing a lot of trading in LA. It's such a lovely thing to connect with people. And
that's good.
People are cooking, people are taking away those little libraries and putting instead toilet rolls and jars of jelly and cans of stuff. And it's so nice. You know, somebody contacted me and said, hey, it's my wedding anniversary and we can't paddleboard. I know you have paddleboards. I'm like, of course, come and take them. And they had a great wedding anniversary. But if you are hoarding mentally or indeed emotionally, if you're binging, what runs that is not enoughness. And all you have to do is say, I'm enough. I don't need, it even stops you overeating. I'm enough. I don't need more. As long as you feel not enough, you'll always need more. So the second thing I loved, I'm sorry I'm talking very quickly, but I really want to get this in because it's so good, was surrounding yourself with successful people. And it sounds so easy. And of course it is if you have confidence. I'm going to ask you, why should you do that? And how do you do it?
Well, why you should do it is because you become like the people you spend time with. We actually did a study. We've become the average of the 5 people. Most people hang out with the same level of income. If you look at the bars, like in Santa Barbara where I live, there's the bars on Lower State Street where the really poor people hang out. As you go up the street, the bars become more and more beautiful, and more people that are of a higher income. And I remember when I was in Hawaii, I would notice the people wearing the polo shirts would all hang out together. The people wearing the Tommy Bahama shirts would all hang out together. The people wearing the t-shirts that said drinking problem, I don't have a drinking problem. I drink, I fall down, I get up again, no problem. They would hang out together, you know? So basically people were finding their tribe based on their level of I'm enoughness again, based on their level of self-esteem, based on their level of success. And so I always tell people you want to at least hang out one level above where you're currently being. If you're making $50,000 a year and you'd like to make 100,000, find some way to get into the space of $100,000 a year people. If you want to be a millionaire, how can you hang out with millionaires? Well, you may not be able to hang out with them every day in real person, but they're on YouTube. They've got books they've written. They have seminars they do. You can belong to the country club. You can fly first class every once in a while, you know, upgrade, use your miles to sit next to someone who maybe is going to have a better income than you. I remember coming back, I remember using upgrade miles to sit in first class long before I could afford it. And I sat next to the guy who owned the envelope company for sending out the MasterCard bills. And he was the one, I don't know if you've ever gotten a bill in the mail, but sometimes there's a little flap and you can pull it out and it's got an advertisement on it. And we started talking about my seminars and my tapes and my books and my things like that. And we started talking about putting advertisements for my programs in the bills that went out for MasterCharge. And we actually did a little experiment with that and it was very successful. I never would have met him sitting back in coach. Yeah. So, you know, belong to professional associations, become a volunteer. You know, rich people tend to be volunteers. They tend to be on boards of things like the Heart Association. They go to fundraisers. You know, you could literally serve alcohol at a fundraiser, be the bartender there. People talk to you while they're waiting for a drink. You could establish relationships. So we see this in school too. The A students hang out with the A students, the B students hang out with the B students, the C students, and the kids that are into drugs and alcohol and goth and all of that are hanging out together. And so they're vibing at the same level. So you've got to get up a level. So read the things, meet the people, put yourself in that mind space if you can, so that you start thinking like they think. You start being introduced to their networks, the church you belong to. If you go to church, the social clubs you go to. Is the church you go to raise you up and make you feel great, or does it make you feel guilty and bring you down? Yeah. So basically, it's really important to surround yourself with people who've already done what you want to do, because it will rub off on you.
Do you know, sometimes the simplest things are really profound. And I love that, because some people say, yeah, but if I hang out with millionaires, it just makes me feel poor. If I go out with people with loads of money, I'm really worried about spending that money on food. I don't spend $200 on dinner, I spend 20. But the fact that you can hang out online is such a great, so simple, hang out online with millionaires. You know, I have the opposite. I often have clients who are going to go, you know, I can't find a guy. Where are you looking? Well, I go to yoga. Any men in the yoga? No, it's all women. Well, why are you going to yoga? The men are in the weight room. Go there. Or what? When I go to a women's book club, are there any men there? No. What else do you do? I watch TV. I'm like, okay, you have to be proactive. If you want to find a guy, go where guys are. Do weights. Turn up at a car wash on a Saturday. Go to golf. There's not many beautiful women at golf clubs. If you're attractive and interesting, you'll be married in a year. And then I meet guys. I can't find a girlfriend. What do you do? I'm in the weight room. Well, you need to go to yoga. Don't sit at home with your coffee and papers. Go to a cafe, a busy cafe on a Saturday where all the yummy mummies are. Many of those are actually single, but it's so obvious to you and I. Put yourself in front of the person you want to be with, whether that's in a relationship. You know, when I wrote my first book, I was invited to a dinner party and ended up sitting next to a publisher who actually ended up publishing my book. But there's no such thing as a stroke of luck or a coincidence. I was committed to writing, and the universe put right in my path a publisher. So the final thing I love out of your 64 principles was the positive money mindset, because I see so many with the money blocks. I mean, we know because 70% of lottery winners go dead bankrupt in 3 years because of what you were just saying before. They don't have that mindset. Tom Jones said, you know, when I made it, I had to couldn't go to the pub. If I went to the pub in my village and got out my wallet, they went, there you go, showing off, making us all feel bad. If I didn't get it out, they go, what's wrong with you, Tom? You're a millionaire. You can't even buy us a drink anymore. It's like, I couldn't win, because he left his comfort zone. And many, many lottery winners say, well, I didn't know who I was. I moved. People didn't like me. If I stayed in the same place, I went, you shouldn't be in this council house now. You know, you should move. It's not right. And it's getting out of your comfort zone. And I always think the lottery winner figures are phenomenal. I mean, I've worked with so many lottery winners who went broke. I've worked with rock stars who are earning $20 million a year for 5 years. It's not a long career, and have no money at the end. So I'd love you to finish with, I mean, I could talk to you forever, but I value your time. Why is it so important to develop a positive money mindset, and how does our audience do that?
Well, I want to just go back to 1 second you said about the comfort zones. One of the things I do in my seminars, I have people fold their hands like this, and I have them notice which thumb's on top. And so then I have them actually take their hands and move all their fingers up a notch so the other thumb's on top. Don't just move the thumbs, move all the fingers. How does that feel? Everyone says it feels awkward, strange, yucky, wrong, not me, etc. Now, however, the research shows, and if we don't have time to do it now, but if I were to ask you to hold your hands like this for 5 minutes, it would stop feeling uncomfortable. So the way we get out of our comfort zone is 2 ways. Number one, we do the new thing long enough, it stops feeling uncomfortable. I remember when I started buying, you know, I used to buy my shirts at Nordstrom's for $38. Then I became a millionaire and I started buying $138 shirts at on Rodeo Drive in Beverly Hills. And I was really uncomfortable going into those stores. I felt like I was out of place. It's like the imposter syndrome. They're going to find out I'm not really this person. But after about a year of wearing these $138 shirts, I never wanted to go back to a $38 shirt. I developed a new comfort zone. So by hanging out in the place that's unfamiliar, uncomfortable long enough, you will get comfortable. It's just a matter of doing that. Everyone who ever learned to drive a car, you went through that awkward stage. If you learned to use a computer, you went through the awkward stage. And now we type with our hands, eyes closed, and we drive a car with one hand, breaking up a fight in the back seat with the kids with the other hand, whatever. So be willing to be uncomfortable, because uncomfortable will turn into comfortable. That's the first thing. Secondly, as far as your the positive money mindset goes, again, it's a mindset. It's a set of thoughts and beliefs. And so those thoughts and beliefs were inculcated either by your parents, by the culture. You know, money's evil, easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than a rich man to get into heaven. Money corrupts absolutely. You know, all that kind of stuff that we hear growing up. The truth is, it's not, money doesn't corrupt you. The lust after money corrupts you. People don't even quote the Bible correctly. But the point is that we can learn to be comfortable with money. And what I would encourage you to do is to start examining your thoughts. You do that when you work with people. You've quoted lots of negative thoughts that people bring up. And then look at what is the opposite thought, you know, and then create an affirmation and write it down. And then repeat that affirmation over and over and over and over. Like, you can basically do a couple of things. Negative money beliefs can be tapped out using EFT tapping. You just tap on this belief and you can tap that out. Literally, you can disappear a belief in like 5 to 10 minutes. I've done that hundreds of times with people. You can go back to childhood I remember a woman who was basically, you talked about someone like this, we were very poor, therefore, money doesn't grow on trees, and we can't afford this. Who do you think you are? Don't you care about the rest of the family? You're so greedy, all that kind of stuff that she grew up with. But when she went back and saw that was just her parents living in fear, and that she was now 35 years old, the economy was different, and all that was available. She had new skills she could use. Then she was able to say, okay, I can have a new belief now. Now, once you have that new belief, you can also put that in by tapping on while you say the new belief. I have enough money to do anything I want. I have enough money to do anything I want, whatever it might be. And you get comfortable with that belief. You can have it on a card. In my wallet, which I don't have because I haven't used my wallet in 2 months because I've only left my house once. So I don't have it on my person at home. But where my driver's license shows, I have a affirmation for my goal. So every time I take my wallet out to use a credit card, I see this affirmation for my goal. Another thing that my mentor, W. Clement Stone, taught me, he was a good friend of Napoleon Hill, who wrote Think and Grow Rich, is always carry $100 bill. Now, when I learned that, I was not making that much money. I was probably making $18,000 a year as a school teacher in Chicago. And to carry $100 bill around was like, that was a big chunk of money. And he said, every time you pull out your money, you're going to see that $100 bill and you're going to go, wow, I'm rich. So just literally starting to act like that. Another thing that people think they have to do, they think they have to be rich to be generous. You can give away a small percentage of your income, 1%, 2%, whatever. You don't have to be wealthy to tithe. I'm not saying you have to do 10%. I do, but you don't have to. But the point being, if you tip, maybe give an extra dollar, and it makes you feel a little wealthy that you were able to do that. It was a nice, generous thing you did. And what I find is the more I give away, the more that comes back to me. I have about 100 trainers I've trained in India to teach my work. And I was just over there in February, and they had a little reception for me. And one of the guys who is in charge of all these people over there said to me, he's now requiring everyone there to do 2 free days of training a month for the homeless, for women's shelters, for sex trafficking shelters, for people in prison, for schools, etc. And he said, every one of the people who's actually doing it, their income's going up. They're actually charting this. The more people give away free time, a couple times, you don't want to only be codependent, give away all your time. That's also a problem. But if you give away a couple days a month to charity, to philanthropy, to, a nonprofit organization, whatever, what happens is it comes back multiplied. And so this sense that I have, in order to give something, I have to believe I have enough. And so it goes back to your I'm not enough idea. There's not enough time, not enough money, whatever. The truth is we all have the same amount of seconds and minutes every day, and there's enough money. I love the quote from the Mahesh, what the hell was he called? Maharishi Yogi. And he was going to buy this school. It was a university, it was for sale in Iowa, and they've turned it into their training center now. And his student said, but Maharishi, where's the money going to come from? And he said, from wherever it is now.
Yeah.
I love it,
My
So,
grand used to say, if you wait until you can afford to have a child, you'll never have a child. Or we have the same thing. We have 4,000 people I've trained, and a lot of them do 2 free sessions a month or even a week with people who can't afford it, especially disadvantaged kids. And of course, you're going into abundance, not scarcity. You have to go into an abundance mindset. If I give,
right.
I get back. The more I give, the more I get back, the more I have to give. So, I can't afford to tip, and holding on to the money too tightly is living in scarcity. And having a wealthy mindset is a lot to do with having wealth. There's so many people I know started from nothing, always had wealth. I mean, I was a single parent in a lot of debt, but my little girl would go, Mummy, are we rich? I go, darling, we're rich beyond our wildest dreams. We are so wealthy, we're so abundant. I used to take her to feed homeless people, because when we came home, we'd walk in the front and go, oh my God, we've got a fire, we've got heating, we've got a bed, and we felt like billionaires by going and helping people who lived on the street. And because I always told her we're wealthy, never said we have money, I said we're wealthy, we're rich, we're abundant. She and I both became incredibly wealthy in our own careers, but you have to have a wealth mindset even without the money. You've got to start acting like you have it. Same thing if you want love, you have to keep saying, I'm so lovable, I'm magnetically lovable. You can't go, I'm not lovable, but I'm going to try and find love.
Check out my next video here. The way you feel about anything at any time is down to 2 things: the pictures you make in your head, and the words you say to yourself. And number one habit to stop you being successful is waiting for perfection.